Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Michelle Beck. I work at Breast Friends of Oregon, and we've got a few of us here today who are going to talk about this amazing documentary, Full Circle, which Patrick Norman, who is the director and producer, is here. And we're going to give little bios for everyone. But I hope you've all had a chance to see it. I've actually went back and watched it again today for the second time, and it still brought up so many wonderful emotions that, as I just told Patrick, it makes me want to go get more tattooing done because it was such a wonderful experience for me. But anyway, thank you all for being here. If you have any questions throughout, please put them in the chat and we will answer them at the end. So our panel today is me. I guess I'm your host. So if you are not familiar with me at Breast Friends or in the Full Circle world, which you wouldn't be, but now you are. So thank you, Patrick. Patrick was also my guest on Breast Friends Cancer Support Network back on January 18th. So please go find that episode and listen because it gives a lot of information as well. But I am a 2-time 10-year survivor of breast cancer. I've been volunteering and then an employee with Breast Friends since 2017. And I am also a wonderful recipient of decorative and nipple tattooing post mastectomy. And it could not have been a better experience for me. And it really, I can echo everything else that the women in this film have said, that it just brought amazing closure to me, to my active cancer journey, and made me feel whole again. So it has been 100% recommend from me. And if you're ever in person, I will happily show them off. So today we are here because of the drive and determination. Patrick Norman, he is the director and producer, and his work has been praised by the Huffington Post as independent filmmaking at its best. So it doesn't get much better than that. So his first documentary, or one of his documentaries, I don't know if it was your first, called Pinned, followed high school wrestlers who went to extraordinary lengths, even like wrestling bears, which more power to him, to win a state championship. But it really led to discussion on healthy sports nutrition for school athletes and so many other things. And then is when he kind of got pulled into Full Circle. He's had work in film festivals, network and cable television, and lots of streaming platforms. And he's currently working on his next film projects with other nonprofits, partners, and providers in the community. But right now, we're really focusing on Full Circle as a resource for women and doctors. So, audience out there, if you know of anyone who is in the point where they might be considering getting decorative or nipple tattooing post mastectomy, please share this information with them because it's so valuable. And then I want to introduce Dee Alvarez. She is our tattoo artist who is on here with us. She is local to the Portland, Oregon area. And while she did not do my nipple tattooing, she did a fabulous pink ribbon and boxing gloves. It's hard to see that because it faces me. So, but she is fabulous for all of her work. Dee is a survivor herself, a Marine Corps veteran. I know there's the right yell for that, but I can never remember what it is. My husband is a Marine, so once a Marine, always a Marine. Thank you for your service. And she's also a mother of 3. She is dedicated, after 30 years of graphic design, she decided to venture into tattooing and has never looked back. And she actually has done her own nipple and areola tattoos. And so she understands what it's like to have women go through this process because she's done it herself, which is in the film is amazing because there's artists there who've actually done their own on legs and stuff because they didn't need the nipple tattoos, but they're like, we're going to do this to make sure we got it right. So, excuse me, Dee is one of those artists who truthfully believes in what she's doing because she did it to herself. So I love that. And we are hoping that one of our film stars is going to jump on, Jamie Jensen. We're waiting to hear from her, so hopefully she'll be here soon. But Jamie was the redhead in the movie, and she was 33 when she had her first mammogram after feeling pain in one of her breasts, and nothing came up. Well, 2 years later, she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, and it was her kid's last day of school. So, as you can imagine, it was very traumatic for her. She had a double mastectomy with reconstructive surgery and really had something which we've all experienced if we've gone through this. called the drive-by, where you look in the mirror and you see these scars and you're like, "Oh," and it just brings tears to your eyes because something has been taken away from us when we've had mastectomies, and she really decided that she didn't wanna have any more surgeries to create nipples or have any more reconstruction, because you can create nipples through surgery, but she was one of those who decided that she preferred realistic areola and nipple tattoos, and it really brought her a sense of closure and allowed her to feel like herself again, so hopefully she'll jump on here. Um, Pelagia, I will find that episode number and give it to you, of the podcast when we're done. So we're going to jump into questions here. And first, I'm going to start with Patrick. So, welcome. And why did you decide to make this film? Because it's not a transition from wrestling to nipple tattoos.
Right. Well, thanks, Michelle, for that introduction, and thanks everyone for joining us. And right, as you said, you can't really see the through line from high school wrestlers to mastectomy tattoos. But as I like to say, I made pin for high school wrestlers, and I made full circle for their moms. And for me, it's I think one of the wonderful things about being a documentary filmmaker is you just really have no idea where your next project is going to come from. And in the case of Full Circle, I just happened to find an article in a magazine about one of these artists who was doing specifically nipple and areola tattoos on flat skin, and really sort of raising the awareness for that kind of tattooing option, something more photorealistic than some of the more elaborate pieces. And as I did more research on the subject, I discovered just the wide range of tattooing options that were available. And it was in actually discussions with a producer friend of mine who herself was a breast cancer survivor. She said that when she went through this process, she really didn't know anything about, what non-surgical options would be available to her after her reconstruction. And, her experience was dealing with, it was like an esthetician that worked with her doctor's office, but they did some tattooing. The ink they used was some sort of medical grade ink, but it faded very quickly. And she just really was unhappy with the results. And what she said to me was that had she known about these tattooing options when she was going through all of her treatment, all of her surgeries, like if she would have known about this at the very beginning, it would have made all the difference in the world. And so for me as a filmmaker, that set off a light bulb. I really saw there was an opportunity to discuss this and to raise awareness for these kinds of options for women, but also to do it in a way that I hadn't really seen done before in the media. I think that certainly this topic has been talked about in a few different places previously, but it's like a news package during Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and it's like a quick 2-minute thing. And the way they do it, just because of what they're allowed to show on network news, um, it never really to me conveyed like a sense of the true intimacy or power of this kind of art form. It was always everything was done in wide shots, and they always had these blaring sound effects of tattoo needles, and it just seemed sort of off-putting. And I think in my approach to this, I wanted to make sure that this film was much more relatable, and it didn't scare women off who maybe were on the fence about tattoos or had never considered this, but to really leverage the power that that a documentary film could bring to this, to do something a bit more visual, a bit more artistic, that would just make this whole process seem more accessible.
And watching the film again today, I was struck by some of the shots and how literally you had cameras right up to these women's breast with the tracings on. Dee, what are those tracings called? Where you put the
Stencils.
one more time?
Stencils.
Stencils, thank you. Putting the stencils on and then doing the work with the various colors and all of that. And it really showed such a wonderful representation of what truly is happening. And
Mm.
and then you also look at these women's faces and they're at peace. And then watching them afterwards is so flippin' amazing. But Patrick, how did you find women who wanted to be your participants, to literally show off their bodies, which were scarred and can cause a lot of emotions?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, it's obviously a very delicate casting call for a situation like this, and it was sort of a two-pronged approach. The first thing we did was I reached out to a nonprofit called Personal Inc. Their entire goal is to raise awareness for these kinds of tattoos and also to connect women with the artists who are doing this work. So they were able to put me in touch with a few tattoo artists and sort of get a sense of, if they had any clients who were getting this work done that may be open to something like this. So we had a few discussions with some women that way, but then we also just threw up our website and said, look, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. If you're a woman who is going through this process, if you're considering these tattoos, reach out to us. We'd love to hear your story. We'd love to learn more about what you're doing and why. And really, I think that the three women we wound up going with, for the film all came through that. They really came to us. And I think it was really a testament to them and I think they discovered us in their early research for these kinds of tattoos. But I give them, so much credit and so much kudos for having just sort of the courage to say, not only am I going to do this, but I'm willing to do this on camera to help other women.
I love that. Now I'm going to jump over to you, Dee. Welcome and thank you for being here with us today. Because as a tattoo artist who has done her own nipples and areolas, your experience is really invaluable. Now, you changed over to be a tattoo artist prior to your breast cancer experience, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you were a tattoo artist, you went through breast cancer. Tell us how that was and why you decided to tattoo yourself.
Well, part of it was one of my goals in going into tattooing. One of the specialties I wanted to have was to do mastectomy tattoos because I lost my mother in my early 20s to breast cancer.
Okay.
And so it's always had a tug on my heart. And then after going through beginning my process with breast cancer, I immediately told my plastic surgeon, I'm going to tattoo my own nipples and areolas. And he kept pushing the reconstruction of nipples. And I kept telling him, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to tattoo this so that I have the personal experience to pass on to my clients.
I love that. And do you have a particular style that you're known for in terms of your nipple tattoos, or how do you decide with your clients what they're going to look like?
Well, the majority of clients that I've done have actually been decorative mastectomy tattoos, like the flowers and things. And my personal feeling is that I should tailor it to what the client wants, the style that they like and prefer, versus trying to stick to my personal style as a tattoo artist. Because I've seen a lot of that in the industry where tattoo artists only do one style. And I was told that in tattoo school, pick one style and stick with it. And I said I couldn't have survived as a designer for 30 years without tailoring my design to the client's needs. And that's the same thing that I do with tattooing.
Well, it's so personal. As someone who's had multiple tattoos, we want to love what we have on our own body.
Right.
So thank you for being individualizing your designs, because I know you've worked with me on my other tattoo as well. But that's the same for how do you want your nipples and your areolas to look? Like, you're the expert, so we're listening to you on this, but it's really
Right.
a true collaboration.
And I also, I definitely encourage women before they go through the process to take pictures of their actual nipples so they have them for reference if that's what they're going for and the look and style that they want to be a little more personalized for themselves instead of just the cookie cutter nipple styles that are out there.
That totally makes sense. Now, Patrick, I'm going to jump back to you. What was the experience like of filming this project? I know it was over a period, and some of it you were going across country and back. And overall, what was that like for you? And what do you feel like it was for the artists and the women in the film?
Well, each of the women that we filmed were sort of in a different part of the country, so there was a lot of travel involved. And the way that I approached it was really to get a sense first of, just sort of their before sensibilities, right? Where they're at now, what their breast cancer journey was like up to this point, and then obviously filming their tattoo process, and then giving some time for them, to think about it, to heal, to reflect, and then coming up and doing sort of follow-up interviews later on. So, as we say in the documentary world, documentaries take forever and a day to make. And this film was no exception, given the amount of time that we had to just spend to accommodate different surgeries and updates and things like that. But for me, I was really excited to approach this project, but it was also intimidating, right? Because you're dealing with such a sensitive subject matter, and in many cases, like when we would arrive to film these women, it was like our first time meeting them face to face in person, just because of the distance. And so, we'd had like FaceTime conversations, we had several phone calls, but it's sort of awkward to sort of like meet someone for the first time, rolling with a camera crew, and say, okay, great, now we're going to have to film like what your appearance is at this point. We're going to have to see the before picture. And so being mindful of that, I try to do everything I could to make people feel at ease during the production process. And that started with keeping it as minimal as I could. I think so often in a film shoot, you're so used to having all the, gear and the toys that film production brings with it. So lights in your face. And I wanted to step as far back from that as possible and just make this much more of an intimate conversation. So the crew was literally myself and my camera guy, and that was it. And so we were just trying to, talk to people in their homes. We thought that being in a comfortable environment would be very helpful, and it was. And so we just did everything we could to make these women a part of the process, right? Particularly when we were filming, the surgical work that they'd had prior to being tattooed. We just wanted to be inclusive, right? It was never like, we're going to go shoot stuff and we're not going to show you what it is. In the cases where we had husbands or partners present, they were standing right next to us, seeing exactly what we were filming. We'd flip the viewfinder over so that women could sort of see what we were recording and just get, a sense of how they were being portrayed on film. So we were just trying to establish trust as quickly as we could. But I will say that, one thing that really struck me was the first interview we did with Brenda, who in the film has this really wonderful decorative mastectomy tattoo that covers everything. And, when we first met her, she was our first interview, the first time that we'd done any of this. And so we'd had our interview and it was great. And then then came time to just sort of get the close-ups of the different, where she was at surgically. And I remember going, okay, well, we're going to film this, but as we started, I instinctively turned away to give her privacy. And she just burst out laughing at me. She's like, that's adorable that you're doing that. But do you have any idea how many doctors and surgeons and nurses and interns and people have seen my breast? Like, I'm not shy from this anymore. And that, I think I'd understood that through research. I understood it intellectually, but the minute that happened, it just completely hit me emotionally. Like I started to really understand how desensitized it and how transformed her, take on her own body was. So that moment really, really stood out. But I think for a lot of it was really just a matter of, trying to engage these women and build a sense of trust and rapport so that they knew that, their stories and these images would be in good hands.
Now, what kind of feedback did you get from the women after they've seen the film for the first time? Because I had nothing to do with the film other than I've experienced the same thing. But what was it? What did they feel like afterwards?
Certainly when you're tasked with telling someone's true story, and you haven't shown them rough cuts along the way, they just all of a sudden see the final product. You're always holding your breath because you just never know what they're going to think. And I was overwhelmed at the response. Folks were in tears. They loved the film, but they were just so happy to have been a part of it. And they could really sort of see that that the trust that they placed in us during production was well placed. And I was just so personally gratified and professionally gratified. They were so pleased with the final product. That really meant a lot.
I love that. And I'm sure they've gotten in the Jamie mentions in the film that she showed off her tattoos to a few people, and then she decided to kind of keep it more private after that. So I'm sure for her it was like, okay, well, I can keep them private now, but you can watch this film to see how amazing they are. So it kind of gives them the alternative to show off the amazing experience they've been through.
Certainly, and I think that for her having that sort of, I remember, as on the day of filming her tattoo, as soon as she'd seen the results in the mirror, she had that like instinct to cover herself up again, and she hadn't had that before. But it was like an instant reaction, like that immediately came back, and already early on in her sort of tattoo recovery process, you could really see that switch flip in her. That I think her attitude really started to change, and I've heard similar reactions from a number of other women just to talking about the film. And I think that just sort of speaks to the lasting power of this kind of art, how it can just so quickly transform the way that you see yourself.
Definitely. Now, Dee, as a tattoo artist who is doing these tattoos, what is the atmosphere like in your shop? Because it's not like you're gonna I know personally what your studio is like, but how did you create it to have a welcoming atmosphere for people who want to do something like this, but still might be modest?
Well, I don't have the typical tattoo shop. Mine is a private studio with an enclosed room. It's bright, colorful, relaxing. I have music playing. I provide stress balls for people to squish with their fingers and hands while they're getting worked on. Just really talking to people throughout the process, helping them to feel at ease about what they're experiencing, and, just tailoring it to what the client needs.
Perfect. Now, when someone comes to you who's considering whether it's the nipple or the decorative full breast tattooing, how do you work with them when they've never actually had a tattoo or considered having a tattoo previously?
Well, it begins with just having a conversation. What kind of things do you like? What size are you imagining? Placement on the body, discussing details, finding a style that they like, that they're envisioning for their own project. And, like I've said, it's really about tailoring it and helping them to bring their imagination to fruition.
And I imagine it's showing off your prior work as well. I know you've got, and I'm gonna give the shout out for where listeners can find your work, if because we're supporting of all of our people here, First Circle and our tattoo artists.
Well, primarily the majority of my work is on Instagram, at defrost_design, and it's defrost with 2 E's.
Perfect. So thank you. Okay, back to the questions. So have you ever tattooed anyone because it's the new, I'm not going to say new rage, but the new thing that is really popping up for an aesthetic flat closure?
Yes. I have one client in particular. We started off with an upper chest piece, and then we've added other pieces because she didn't necessarily want to cover the scars, but she wanted to look at her chest and feel as though it was beautiful. And it's been tailored to the things that have inspiration for her.
I love that. And I'm so happy with the attention that aesthetic flat closure is getting, because there are women who do not want to have reconstruction, but they also don't want to be concave. And so there are wonderful plastic surgeons out there who are doing this work. So if you are literally going to be having a mastectomy, look at the options. There's a wonderful book out called Flat and Happy, but I cannot recommend the tattoos enough personally because I've been there. And even though I had reconstruction, for me, it was getting the nipples back so I could feel like whole again. And one of the things that I was concerned of was what it was going to feel like, because I'm a big wimp and I don't like needles, even though I've had breast cancer twice. So how do you explain or talk to women about the potential pain aspect if they haven't gone through the tattoo process?
Well, I start off asking them if their incisions where the scar tissue is, if it's sensitive to touch, because the majority, at least in my experience, the majority of them, that skin is very numb to start with. As you get farther away from the scar tissue, the sensitivity is there. But that first session, if we do multiple sessions, that first session is generally pretty numb. So there's not a lot of fear. There's not 2 minutes into it, they're like, "Are you tattooing?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm actually putting ink in the skin." A follow-up session will actually usually entail numbing creams and things, because as that tattoo heals, your body actually regenerates nerve tissue in the skin in those areas. So it'll be more sensitive the second time around. But with numbing creams and sprays, it's generally not an issue at all.
I have to say, when I experienced mine, I went to my tattoo artist studio, and she had the paper on the chair like a medical office, and literally I was so nervous I sweated through the entire thing because I'm like, "Oh my God, this is gonna hurt. This is gonna hurt." And then she started and I was like, "Oh, this doesn't hurt." Because it's the, as you were saying, it's, you're numb in those areas. And so I
Mhm.
had my nipples, and on one of my breasts I have decorative as well. And as you get to the more the outsides of the breast, you feel it a little bit, but nothing compared to a regular tattoo.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and with beauty there is always pain. So, but thankfully this not so much, because we've been through enough pain as breast cancer survivors.
Yeah. The goal is generally to minimize as much trauma and, you know, realizing that there's a trauma release through that process. So there may be tears, there may be emotions coming out and flowing through, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And my goal is always to provide an environment that makes them comfortable to do that as well.
Now, have you had any of your clients tell you anything that surprised them about the tattoo process or the end results?
I think the biggest surprise was just how whole they felt afterward. That one client in particular, Julie, you know her,
Mhm.
she was so like, oh my God, they're so beautiful again. Like I can look at
Yes.
my breasts again. Like she had, like most of us do, avoided eye contact or vision of them. And suddenly she was very excited about feeling pretty and feeling feminine and feeling in herself again about her breasts.
Yeah, and were they roses or giant flowers of
Yeah,
some sort? God,
big roses.
they were stunning. And Julia's darker skinned, and Dee, you did such a fabulous job on making those colors pop and so bold. And I haven't seen her since, but she posted herself in addition to your
Mhm,
post. And I was like, damn, those are beautiful. But you could tell just how happy she was. And by watching the women in the film too, when they see the final picture, whether it's the decorative or the nipples, it's literally such a confidence builder and a booster. And I think one of them was Brenda. She was single when she was going through everything. And then
mhm,
she was very nervous about showing someone her chest. But once she got her tattoos, she's like, I'm ready. And she talked about at the end of the film how she had met someone and everything was good. And her tattoos gave her that confidence again to get out there, which is
mhm.
amazing.
Absolutely.
And so, I'll jump back to you, Patrick, and then we'll come back to you, Dee. So, what, Patrick, advice do you have for women who are curious about this? How do they go about the research process, and what would you tell someone who came to you today?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is to watch my movie because it's wonderful. So check out Full
Perfect.
Circle. But you know, I think so. A couple of things because I think there are a lot more resources coming out on this topic. And the first thing I would say is do your homework, right? Like one thing that we want to make sure we're encouraging throughout this film and all the discussions it's raising is putting women towards tattoo artists who are experienced in this type of work. We don't want people to just find any old tattoo shop on the street. We really want you to,
Mhm,
do your homework and find an artist that you're comfortable with, who has experience, dealing with irradiated skin or different scar tissues, things like that. Just someone who really has more of a sense of the intricacies of what this kind of work entails. So the first thing we'd say is definitely do your homework. Um, and then really just look at prior examples of their work, always see a portfolio, always get a sense of the track record of an artist, because the last thing you want to do is roll the dice on a piece of art that's going to be permanently put on your skin. So just make sure that you are comfortable with the tattoo artist, but shop around, look at a couple different artists. I would say if you have friends that have been through this, or other women through support groups or through family, see what their experience was like, get reviews, see what their if they might have a recommendation for you. And again, if you don't have that, I would say look at Personal Ink. I think their website is pink.org, but they do maintain a database of artists all over the world who do this kind of work. And so even if you don't have one in your hometown, there's going to be an artist somewhere nearby that it wouldn't be too much to travel to. And that's also a great place to go for inspiration, because there's so many different kinds of this artwork being done. You may go into this thinking you want something, and then through research and through inspiration, you may find yourself wanting something completely different. So I would say, find an artist you're comfortable with, do your homework, and then be open to the inspiration that will come from meeting with these artists.
mhm.
I love that. So definitely do your research and be your own advocate, which is something we talk about all the time in all aspects of a cancer diagnosis. Speak up for yourself and do your own research, because yes, we have other people who do the work for us, but you need to be good with what you're doing in your heart. And so obviously the women in your film are, and you've portrayed that so well. Now, Dee, jumping back to you, what has surprised you most about doing this kind of work?
I think just feeling that connection to the community in general with um, other breast cancer survivors, other people who've been through the process who can relate, and just having that deeper level of connection. I generally am very personalized in my service anyway with my regular clients, but I just feel like there's such a deeper sense of connection and fulfillment in being able to provide such a personalized and wonderful recovery step in their recovery. And being able to restore some sense of self-esteem, some pride in being able to recover what they've lost.
That's so that quote right there, recovering what you've lost, is really key to all this, because and Patrick, you portrayed it so well, even without having to go through the process, because one of the things that keeps coming up in my Instagram feed is that a mastectomy is an amputation, and having this process to make something beautiful that was taken from us is giving us back this sense of loving our bodies and beauty. And you've really portrayed that so well. How did you approach the filming and the tattooing process? Because for most artists, I imagine it probably is a little unnerving having a camera right there when they've got the needle going on and the breasts out. What was that like for you and the artists?
Not awkward at all. Well, I think, as I said, earlier, so much of the media that I've seen on this subject matter, again, felt so impersonal. It felt like it was always filmed from the other side of the room. And for whatever reason, they always kept leaning on the atmosphere of the tattoo needle being this constantly buzzing noise. And I wanted to do something completely different. I wanted to approach this sort of like an art film and to really lean into the visuals and to just build something that I think visually conveyed the effect this was having on these women as they were going through the process. And so for me, what that meant was, and when you see the tattooing sequence in the film, the buzzing needle goes away right away, and then we drift into this sort of, I don't know, what Brenda calls the Zen place, right? And we just sort of get a sense of, the tattoo taking place, but then getting more abstract and showing how through different, whether it's like shots of flowers or people on the beaches, those all came from interview bites that these women had described what they were feeling during the process. And in the earlier cut of the film, I had some of those sound bites, women talking about just feeling like a sense of rebirth or being reborn. That's where some of the flower imagery comes from. Jamie talked about just in her mind, she was like walking on the beach again. That was sort of her calm little Zen place. And what I found is that by taking that sound bite out, by getting rid of the voiceover and just letting the picture speak for themselves, that I think that resonated a lot more powerfully with the audience. And that's sort of the feedback that I've received from it. But I think particularly with, approaches to filming that, one thing I wanted to do was show tattooing in a way that I don't think has really been seen before, which is a lot of the extremely slow motion tattooing. You were mentioning some of the close-ups where we're right in there with the needle. And that is about as 180 as I think you can get from filming on the other side of the room in a wide shot. This is macro photography up close, literally seeing the ink and the needle going in and out. But I think by playing with time, which is something you can do in filmmaking, you really get a different sense of what you're seeing. And by slowing it down so much, it almost looked like, a needle or a suture, like the ink going in and out, it almost had kind of a healing quality to it, like you're being sewn back up, for lack of a better sense. But I think that visual really came across. And the thing is about filming something like that is when you're filming high frame rate photography like that for that extreme slow motion, you need a ton of light, right? So Brenda was a good sport about this, because when we got that photography, that close up of her, we had to have giant lights in like a really tight little contained space for the tattoo studio. And so, we were also conscious, like we weren't going to do that all day. We knew that there was only a certain portion of the process that required all that. But, Holly, the tattoo artist, and Brenda were great sports in putting up with sort of that really intense lighting for a little bit. And then once we got that footage, we got all that stuff out of the way and just, approached it in a more laid back fashion. But yeah, it required a few extra toys, but I think at the end of the day, it gave us a completely different visual sense of what this tattooing process could look like.
Definitely. I was actually watching it today on my iPad, and at one point I literally picked it up and even brought it closer to my face, because I'm like, that is freaking amazing. Seeing the tattoo needle in slow motion, like putting the ink into the skin. I was like, okay, wow, that's what happened. Cause I'm not gonna lie, I kind of blocked out the whole experience just because I don't like needles overall, even though it wasn't painful. But seeing that in a different way, it's like, oh, that's kind of what happened. No, I was gonna ask Jamie, but I'm gonna talk about myself because I like to talk about myself, but how my life and how I felt after my tattooing. I literally went to my tattoo artist like 6 months post mastectomy, and she's like, "You're not ready." I'm like, "Well, what do you mean I'm not ready? I'm healed. My exchange surgery's done. I'm good to go." And I'm incredibly fair, and my scars were still very, very red. And she's like, "I need your scars to calm down. I need them to get more closer to your skin color, not be, angry looking." But I was so anxious, and it kind of bummed me out, and I was depressed for a while that I had to get up every day and look in the mirror at my scars. And I had had a lot of work done on my left breast, so I had additional scarring on that side, and it was just like, oh, like I didn't want to look at it. Why would my husband want to look at that? Which is especially a whole nother issue when you go through something like this. And then once I was finally able, to get my tattoos, and for me, it was a 2 process because I had decorative as well. It literally changed my life. I wanted to I'm not modest, but at that point, I was like, "Here," I wanted to walk around naked all the time because 'cause I'm like, "Look at my beautiful boobs," and I have cherry blossoms on one side as well. And it made me so much more self-confident because as you had mentioned in the film, I didn't feel like Barbie anymore. Not that I had the Barbie figure because no one does and no one should want it, but just the blank chest palette. Like in our heads, we're supposed to have something there. And having nothing other than scars is so awful. But afterwards, it literally like, I mean, obviously, I tell everyone I think they should get it, even when it's really none of my business. I'm like, "You should get some tattooing." And they're like, "Okay." But I'm like, "No, now I can actually back it up with the film." Um, Dee, what was your experience like after yours were done on yourself? How did it change for you?
I think it just really gave me that sense of, okay, they're like, I didn't have the Barbie effect anymore. Catching it in the mirror in the bathroom, you get that sense of, okay, there's something there because it's missing until you get that visual back. Um, I do recommend for women who are in the process of waiting to get some temporary ones because they will last, some of them a few days, some longer, but it'll just give you that sense of having a visual there to where you feel just a little back, closer back to normal.
Mhm.
There's no returning, there's a new normal, but it just gives you a little visual sense of being able to, okay, this is what I'm going to have permanently one day, but it gives you that temporary ability to fill the gap.
To see what it's gonna look like, okay, yes, this is what I want, or you could go with the decorative. Now, you said the majority of the women you've done post mastectomy are decorative. What are the reactions when they're complete? Like, how do they feel, or how do they sorry, my words are all jumbled up because my cancer brain. Uh, how do they feel about the tattoos that you've done for them?
They're just overwhelmingly joyful. They're so excited. Like Julie specifically was just bouncing off the walls. Like you could just see the energy radiating off of her. She was just so overjoyed and so wonderful because we did hers in 2 sessions. We did one side first and then did the other side. And, just that sense of accomplishment too, like going through this whole process and bringing yourself to a point where you feel good again. It's just an amazing, it's amazing to watch the light and sparkle return to somebody's eyes.
Definitely. And Patrick, you fully show that in the film, and it's really amazing to watch the confidence level, especially of Jamie when she was showing off her pre-tattooed breasts, and then afterwards, just that, like you say, the twinkle in their eye and the spark that these tattoos are giving them back. So Dee, has your business for post-mastectomy tattoos grown at all over time? Do you feel like it's becoming more widely known and talked about?
Um, I mean, it's really such an individual experience for everybody. I think there's the more that I do, the more word of mouth travels. Even the women who I've done post mastectomy tattoos on, their friends come to me for other tattoos because they don't have the need for the work, but they're just so excited by the process and seeing everything that you know, I imagine with a film like this out in the public, the awareness is going to raise,
I love
and
that.
I think it'll make a big difference, and it'll grow that part. I actually don't do these for fine the typical fee that I do for other tattoos. They're actually greatly discounted because I want to feel like I'm contributing back to the community that means so much to me.
I love that. So, and what you just mentioned before that brought me to my next question for Patrick. What is next for Full Circle, and how are you working to get it out other than events like this to the breast cancer community?
Certainly. Well, and as Dee was saying, I think that the end game has always been to raise awareness and to make this as much of a resource for the breast cancer community as we can. And so, now that we're in 2023, we are off to the races. It's an exciting time for the Full Circle world. Later on this year, we actually have a national broadcast on PBS starting. That's going to kick off in October for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And really between now and then is what we're focused on in doing a grassroots outreach campaign to the breast cancer community. So whether it is doing events like this, where we're having screenings for, support groups or nonprofits or providers and hospital systems, just finding a way to be able to use the film to supplement their programming, engage their communities, and getting it out there in the most meaningful way. So the screenings are definitely a big thing that we're doing. We've also got a toolkit in the works that has over an hour of just extended interviews and deleted scenes, just a lot of stuff that we know is valuable to the community, but just for runtime restrictions, we couldn't fit on the film for our PBS runtime. But, nevertheless, it's still valuable. So we still want to find ways of making that accessible. So for us this year, it is all about reaching out, getting the film in front of the people who need to see it the most.
Perfect. And the website for more information, it's fullcircledoc.com.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. And I think that gets to the end of our actual panel discussion, but we do have some Q&A that was brought up in the chat. Dee, we've gotten your number on there, or your Instagram. And for those who would like to go back and listen, or you can also watch the podcast episode that Patrick was on. It was January 18th, and you can find it on all the podcast platforms or on the Breast Friends YouTube channel. And what else? Ooh, so Dee, what was it like tattooing yourself? How did that process work?
I was just typing out a reply to the question. But it, it's kind of weird. I actually filmed it. So I have pictures of myself doing it. It's kind of surreal to watch afterward, but honestly, it was very easy. It was even my plastic surgeon was like, wait, how are you going to do that? And honestly, it was utilizing mirrors for placing the stencil, making sure things were lined up, all that kind of stuff. And because obviously the reconstruction isn't the size that I was before, it was just basically looking down and doing a typical tattoo on myself. So
okay, that's just badass. That's all I've got to say.
Hardcore. I love
it. Now, where Patrick, I'm sure you know this as well, or Dee, because in the film they talk about it, where do you find the temporary tattoos?
I'll just drop a little plug for one of our partners called Tata Tattoos. They have a wide array of different skin tone selections, different color options and sizes. And in a lot of these companies, they'll sort of send you like a sampler kit. So you have a couple of different, sizes or durations, things that you can kind of see on yourself what maybe works best for you. So I would say Tata Tattoos is probably the best place to start, but there are a few other companies that do different kinds of prosthesis as well. So whether it is just sort of your traditional temporary tattoo that kind of is like an application that you use water to apply, or there are some that have like silicone, for example, that are more like 3D that you can apply as well. But yeah, if you just Google temporary nipple tattoos, you'll get plenty of options.
Perfect. And one of the other questions is to you, Patrick. Are you trying to get this film out in front of plastic surgeons and doctors, or how does that work? Or what's your plan for that? I know it's the PBS plan for later in the year, but are you also trying to get it in the medical community?
For sure, because as you've seen in the film, I think so often the tattoos that you wind up getting from doctors' offices are just terrible because they're not done by artists. They're done by people who have maybe taken a quick seminar or think they know what they're doing, and they just really don't. And so, my philosophy is always like, let the plumber fix the sink, right? Let the artist do the art. Let people with that kind of skill set who have perfected it and practiced it, let them do it. So yeah, in terms of our outreach, we're certainly looking at different hospital systems. We are looking at conferences where a lot of the plastic surgeons have their annual meetings. So one thing that we want to do with our toolkit is also use that as a way for them to get their continuing medical education credits, because
Mhm.
every year medical professionals need to have so many hours to maintain, different certifications or licenses and so forth. And what I'd love to do, is in addition to sort of giving women the idea of what these options can be, showing doctors maybe that there are better options than what they're considering, and maybe they should team with tattoo artists as opposed to try to doing everything themselves. Particularly in cases where, for two of the three women in the film, when the doctors tattooed over their surgical reconstructions, they ruined their work. And so we're sort of like, well, why would you do that? It doesn't really make sense to sort of do a nipple sparing reconstructive surgery and then tattoo over it and destroy it. Like, to me, it just seems like there's a disconnect between what the medical professionals have been doing and what ought to be done with traditional tattoo artists. So yeah, we were definitely looking at different ways of reaching out to the medical community.
Yeah, you definitely need to get it into next year's San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium somehow, because there is 10,000 doctors there or who are literally just learning all the new techniques. And I remember when I was talking to my plastic surgeon about it, I was too large to have nipple sparing, but she's like, "Well, I can create a nipple for you. But it would be erect all the time and then you get it tattooed." I was like, "Why would I want an erect nipple all the time?" Because I really like wearing t-shirts and tank tops without a bra now. And so that's what really turned me around. I was like, hell no, I'm gonna go get tattooed. And she did mention that to go see a tattoo artist, but I was like, 100% I would not. For me personally, I do not want an erect nipple all the time. Okay, so Dee, have you met anyone that for you've done tattooing on or either one of you or Patrick know of anyone who've done tattoos but then needed to have their implants replaced and you've had to fix the artwork or change anything because of the swapping out of implants? Have you experienced that at all?
I haven't had any clients in particular that needed additional surgery afterward. Um, I'm personally considering going flat myself and having my implants removed. So I'll look forward to that process. But I haven't, I mean, with something like that, I would think that the plastic surgeon would be good about matching up the majority of it. It would probably require a touch up for, just fixing some minor issues with it. But I would think that a plastic surgeon would be pretty sensitive to matching that skin back up.
Hopefully, and if not, you just wait the process and then you get it redone and you can get something more beautiful again. I have a tattoo on my hip that was a seashell, and after I had my son, it became a much larger seashell, and I still need to get it fixed. Haven't done it yet, but it is what it is. It's still beautiful and I love it. Do we have any more questions out there?
There was one that came through
Oh,
about whether or not tattoos were covered by
oh,
insurance.
okay. Hmm.
Which is a super important topic. We do have a little bit more of a detailed answer with some resources on the event page. So if you go to fullcircledoc.com/breast-friends, where you sign up for this panel, it's one of the questions that we have there. But the answer is sort of, right? Certainly the more decorative mastectomy tattoos, the floral things and so forth, we haven't really seen covered. And that's something that I know some groups are advocating for, making legislative changes to include those. What I will say is that I know some insurance plans seem to cover nipple tattooing. I know Medicare often covers it, but that kind of coverage varies state by state. There are, however, different options. So for people who are worried about the cost or being able to afford them, one thing I've mentioned Personal Ink a few times. They do an annual event in October called Pink Day, and if you sign up for that and they approve you, it's effectively a free tattoo. What they have are tattoo artists all over the world who, for a certain set of days in October, they close their shop. They only do mastectomy tattoos, but they're really designed to help people who may not be able to afford them. So that's definitely one option. And there's also a link to another nonprofit called Sharsheret. They're a Jewish women's breast cancer group, but they do have some links to grants and things like that that are available as well. So there are definitely options. Again, we're always trying to raise this kind of information so that insurance can be more inclusive. But the answer is sort of sometimes. But there are
Well,
options if it doesn't.
if not, you find an artist, Dee, or like Dee, who gives you not bargain tattoos, but really lowers the cost because she knows how important it is and how expensive cancer treatment can be. The last thing we want to do is pay $1,000 for tattoos, but I know many women have done it because it makes such a huge difference.
Absolutely.
Perfect. And I am putting something in the chat. If you go to the Full Circle Doc Facebook page, and if you like the film, please comment on that page and let Patrick know what you've thought of the film and other ways to potentially share it or anything else you would like to leave or how it inspired you or others to really see the film. So we would definitely appreciate all of that feedback. And Dee, any final words of advice to someone who might be considering a mastectomy tattoo of any kind?
Um, just the same to reiterate what Patrick said, do your research. It's really, really important to know and have full confidence in who's doing your work. Even meeting them personality wise, things like that. Understanding what the studio is like that you're comfortable in. I worked in another tattoo studio that was kind of open rooms full of people and chaotic. And when I explained that I wanted to do this kind of tattooing, I was met with a lot of resistance. And while some people might be comfortable in that environment, that's not the kind of environment that I think is cohesive to the whole process or provides for the emotional needs of my clients. It's all, you're already dealing with a lot of emotions and a lot of things going on, past trauma, all that kind of thing that's related to the surgeries you've had, the scar tissue, all of that. And I just think really doing your research will make all the difference.
Now, Dee, for someone who's getting decorative tattooing, like in the film where they did, say, a bra or up the sides to cover the port scar, how long does something like that take? I'm assuming it's multiple appointments.
It really depends on the design, the amount of detail, what's going on. Like with Julie's, where we did roses, giant roses, we did 2 sessions. I believe they're about 4 hours each, just to kind of break it up, let her skin heal on one side. So your body isn't too overwhelmed from the immune response. But I've had others that we were able, depending on the amount of skin that you're covering, it could be done in 1 session. But it's really based on the comfortability level for each of my clients.
Got it. Well, thank you. And thank you for being here today. So, Patrick, any last words you would like to share before we sign off?
Well, first, I just want to thank everyone over at Breast Friends for being such a great partner throughout all of this. It's been wonderful getting to know and to work with all of you, and I'm just so thrilled that your community has had such a great response to the film. That means a lot, and so I'm just glad you were all able to have that experience. And what I would say is, for anyone who is moved by the film, like you said, let us know. Reach out. We are on all the socials except for Twitter, because Twitter's kind of crazy right now. But we're at Full Circle Doc on all the socials, so reach out to us. And again, if you know someone who is considering this or has been diagnosed with breast cancer, if you know of anyone in your life who may benefit from the film, please share it with them. Send them the trailer, send them to us. Our goal is really to get this out in front of as many people as possible. It's a mission-driven film. Again, it's not like the Avengers or anything like that. Really, we made this film for a cause. And for us, it's really all just about getting it out in front of the people who could benefit from it the most.
So, well, Patrick, thank you so much for sharing with us this. As soon as Amy brought this to us, we're like, okay, we need to do something with this film because it is so amazing. And I cannot wait till it comes out in October on PBS, and then we can actually share it with more people because it is so important. And with everything with breast cancer, awareness and sharing and just getting the information out there, because for so long it has been such a taboo subject. Freudian slip there. But it's just important to share experiences so the women who have come behind us know what to expect, and that there is light on the other side of the tunnel, and there is beauty even after a mastectomy. So again, thank you everyone for being here today. Obviously, if you're here, you are associated with Breast Friends, so thank you. If you would ever like to help Breast Friends continue on its mission to support women, you can donate on our website. Please check out our patient programs to see what we can do for you. But again, please go to fullcircledoc.com, check out their resources for the links that Patrick was talking about, and please go to their Facebook page and leave a comment about the film. That would really be helpful. So again, thank you all for giving us some time on your Sunday, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
again, everyone.